Hello, and thank you for joining this session of the McGill Executive Institute's Level Up webinar series. My name is Eric Sain, Director of the Institute, and it's a pleasure to welcome you. This session is going to last 1 hour, and it'll be recorded and shared with you afterwards. Although you'll be muted throughout this session, we want this to be very interactive, and so we invite you to submit your comments or questions with the chat function at the bottom of your screen. Also, there will be times during this session where we will put you into smaller groups in order to share ideas. So it really will be an interactive session. For better viewing, we recommend that you turn off the video image of yourself by clicking on Stop Video in the lower left corner. So we're very proud to welcome your webinar leader for today, Carl Lemieux. Carl is a faculty member of the McGill Executive Institute, and he's a specialist in leadership development, mindfulness, and self-management. Pamela Sorrenti, our Director of Open Programs, is going to be your moderator for today. She's a learning advisor and a specialist in creating impactful seminars. So again, welcome to everybody. I see we have people from around the world joining. It's very exciting. Giga from Estonia. We have somebody from Vienna, Austria, people throughout Canada, etc. So thanks again. And why don't we let's get started. So with that, I'll turn it over to you. Here you go, Carl. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eric. What a treat, especially have people from all over the world today. So welcome to this session on stress and how that impacts our decision making. All right, we underestimate how stress is indeed a big player on how we actually just go through our lives. And I would like to even just get this thing going by asking a first question, and then we'll get you on the chat on indeed. I just want to make sure I'm getting this. So what would you say are your main stressors today? So we're going to use a chat function right now to let us know, and Pamela will give us a hand here to summarize the stuff that's going on.
Good morning, everyone. All right, so we have time, the unknown, change, lack of vision, work, being isolated, motivation, money, looking for a job, staffing. Those are two sides of a different or the same coin. The uncertainty of the future, finances, volatility of COVID, deadlines, a lot of uncertainty here, finances, managing kids at home. There's a big, a lot of people are saying time, Carl, balancing home and work. Oh, rescheduling my wedding. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's sad to hear. Yes.
Yeah. My kids' success. Yeah, that we put a lot of on our shoulders for that, don't we? Yeah.
So quite a bit of stuff there. A lot of, and obviously, I've been doing what I'm doing for a little while, and even before COVID hit, even before this pandemic, we were seeing an increasing level of stress in our lives, in our organization. The type of things that we're seeing, this is pre and most likely post-pandemic as well. This notion of VUCA, I'm not sure to what point that's an acronym people know about. We talk about living in this world that's increasingly volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. This was there before. This has certainly accelerated quite a bit since we've been in the pandemic for the last 8 or 9 months. This notion of constant connectivity. So how many of you actually wake up in the morning and one of the first things you do is actually reach over to your smartphone and start checking out what's there? Just that in itself. Imagine you're picking things up, you're hardly awake, and you're already being bombarded with news, information, possibly some textos and emails that have come in. Then you've got this information overload where we're just so bombarded on a daily basis with things that we feel we need to know. It could be as much on Facebook feeds as what's going on in the news, as emails that we're CC'd on, etc. So all this is creating this increasing pace, which I've been seeing going on over the last, I'd say last decade. I thought it had hit a maximum, but I'm realizing it's just a running train right now. Add to that the frequent changes that we're seeing as we go through this COVID, resource constraints, be it financial and others. So you've brought up a lot of what are some of the current stressors. Now, these stressors are just inundating us and are accelerating how we do respond to the world. That is adding stress. So we're going to get into what actually happens in our minds, in our bodies. What I'd first like us to do is take a minute. Now, this is going to be a weird minute for many of you. We're just going to take a minute and we're just going to observe our mind, all right? So I'm going to give a count, and all I'm asking you to do is turn off everything. Don't look at your phone. Don't look at anything. The only thing you're looking at is inside, and observe what's actually happening to your mind when you do nothing. All right? So as of now, 1, 2, and 3, just observe your mind at this point. So the focus is inward. Just see what your mind does when you don't have a task. Still going to leave another 10 seconds. All right. I actually even cut it short. I have a feeling for some of you, even 1 minute of doing nothing was a heck of a challenge. So what shows up? What does the mind do when we take time to look at it? I would love to hear all of your comments, or some of them.
Let's give everyone a few seconds.
Sure.
My mind was calm.
Ooh.
Feelings of despondency. It goes to aches and pains. Creating a list of tasks to do. Internal monologue. That one's strong for me too. Wandering everywhere. Busy still. Trying to drift between focusing on something I have to do later and doing nothing right now, thinking of things to do. So a lot of thinking, wondering, many spinning around. Oh, that's nice. Inner monologues, a lot of that.
So let's see.
We do have a few comms though, which is nice.
Okay, which is good. It'd be interesting if you had more time or access to see why is it these people's minds are calm, because calmness is something we could train. All right, so that's what we're going to be talking about in this session. If we don't train our minds, typically they do go off into 1,001 directions. Very seldom do I hear people say my mind was just off and doing nothing. All right, we have minds which have been built in to be very busy. So our brain has been built, as you could imagine, over millions of years. So there is a very primitive aspect to it, a reptilian and mammalian brain, which is the brain that is scanning the environment. It's just making sure that what is going on will not be of any threat. All right. And that's why some of you, as you were observing your mind, some of you may be going back into the past, revisiting some stuff you've already done. Some of you may have been anticipating what's yet to come. Some of you were probably just wondering, okay, what the heck's going on? This is weird. This doesn't feel comfortable. So the brain is built to be seeking all the time for information. We call it default mode network. Up to 60,000 thoughts in a given day. All right. And the way the brain works is if it perceives the least of threats. So some of you are talking about maybe some financial consideration, dealing with the kids at home, just a pace of everything you need to do in a given day, etc. That in itself is activating what we call the fast pathway. So your fast brain. So today, they're not lions anymore. Historically, there were lions, and there were actually major threats. So the brain was built at a time when threats were life-threatening in many cases. That could include being left out of your tribe. That it could include about, tripping somewhere and breaking your leg or not having enough food, etc. But today, the same brain is interpreting its environment. as soon as it sees something that falls into what you just called a bit earlier when we did the exercise as something stressful in some shape or form, it kicks in that fast pathway. Now that fast pathway also kicks in what we call the sympathetic nervous system. So that system brings us into this fight, flight, freeze type of environment that you've probably all heard about. So by being in this stage of alertness, there's a whole bunch of stuff that happens to your body physically, like your digestive system slows down, your immune system slows down, your productive system slows down, the muscles contract. There's a whole bunch of physiological elements that happen. Now, there are also some psychological elements, and we're going to cover that. But you could just imagine in today's world that we're living in, that's just been augmented significantly. So I see it in my practice regularly. I see to what point our brains are currently being solicited, our emotions are being solicited. And what I'm seeing, I'm also a psychotherapist, so we're seeing increasing cases of stress, anxiety, even depression. Now the challenge with that, this is about decision making. If our brain is in that fast brain, it doesn't have access to the slower pathway. Now what is amazing that we now know, we didn't know, I must admit a few decades ago when I did my neuropsychology about 30, 40 years ago, the information we have about the brain, we didn't know back then. What we know now is when your limbic system, that fast brain, that fast pathway is activated, it actually shuts off neural conduct to the slow brain. Now, the slow brain is a prefrontal cortex. That's the most evolved part of our brain, and that's where all the cool stuff happens. So in terms of decision making, what we see is the fast brain is, when it gets triggered, it will go off and it'll seek out either short-term gratification, like, oh, I'm just going to go watch Netflix. I'm just overwhelmed. Or I'm going to grab a glass of wine. I'm just going to get a bag of chips. All this compulsive type of eating, all this other type of reflex that we have when we get really stressed and tired. It just seeks to either avoid harm or get short-term gratification to take the discomfort away. All right. We'll get into these fight, flight, freeze behaviors. Now, today, we're not going to run away or start hitting people. I hope, most of us, but we will get into all these other behaviors, such as maybe shutting down, not actually being open to people, avoiding, procrastinating, etc., or just having brain fog, things of that nature. Our cognitive abilities become more rigid. So when we're under stress, when we're feeling in some shape or form threatened, the fact that it's the fast brain that kicks in, it actually goes into all the surrounding structures that bring back the memory, all the past ways we've dealt with stress before. Doesn't mean they're good. If I reached out to a bag of chips when I'm stressed, it doesn't mean it's good, but that's what my brain is going to bring me because that's what I've done in the past. And there was all this fat, there was all this stuff that brought me comfort on the very short term. So our cognitive abilities, our thinking abilities are lessened and are rigid and will repeat whatever we've done in the past. It'll bring up all these habits, the habitual patterns that we have in life just show up. We become much more emotionally reactive because of that fight, flight, freeze behavior. So we're going to snap easier at people. We're not going to regulate our emotions as easy. We're just going to want to protect ourselves in a very raw way. That could lead to socially unacceptable behaviors. We tend to judge more, rigidity, we'll blame people, etc. So the fast brain is a great brain to have. We don't want to get rid of it. It's actually probably responsible for 90-95% of our daily way of working, where we're simply in a habit type of environment. But it's not the best of brains, as you can imagine. If you just look on the left-hand side, is that the person we want to be? And ask yourself the question, to what extent is that the person you often are as you're under stress and under all the challenges that we're living? So on the other hand, we have other behaviors, such as being able to think forward, the whole notion of setting goals, being more forward thinking, the whole notion of being able to better differentiate thoughts that may be conflicting, that have to determine whether things are good versus bad. So all the nuances that need to be brought into our daily lives, into our organizations, into our family lives, often require nuance. And if our fast brain is active, we don't have access to that. If we've managed to quiet down our brain, then we do. That's where we're able to anticipate the future, because we're shifting from short term to the ability to also see the longer term, the medium, the longer term. We can predict outcomes because of that. We have better emotional regulation. So we're better able to put a bit of space. We often say about putting space between the stimulus that you have going on, whatever's triggering you, and your reaction to it. So if you're able to put in a bit of space, if you're able to slow down that limbic system, that fast brain, and leave room for the neural cortex to reactivate the prefrontal cortex, you will have better control over your emotions. You will have better control over your thoughts and the words that you actually end up speaking out. So more pro-social behavior, which includes notion like not judging right off when you're coming into a situation. You have more openness, you have more compassion to people. So you can see just one understanding that we do move from our very quickly into a fast brain. Now, just before this session, we were just debriefing how we start this. I just felt my body reacting. Okay, there's a lot of people. All right, we have to put on the slides, etc. There's supposed to be a music slide before you started. I did press the right button. So right away, I just felt this fast brain going into action. If I didn't reconnect with myself, that fast brain, I would have arrived here actually quite anxious, quite stressed. So, and that tends to bring everything we're seeing to the left. So we have a fast brain, which gets us out of trouble, but with old habits, often with rather abrupt and prompt ways of working. And then we have this slower brain. We're talking nanoseconds here. But that slower brain is what brings about those beautiful human qualities that we all wish to have, that we all seek to have, that we all train to have, but we don't have access to them, where the brain is particularly tired, overwhelmed, stressed, etc. All right, so what we would like, well, the first thing maybe just to...
Actually, Carl, there is a
yes,
question.
wonderful, please.
Yeah, so is it possible to trick our mind to use our slow brain even if we're stressed?
Totally. So that's what we're going to be talking about. So thank you so much for the question, the perfect leading to this. So the main way of training the mind is to find moments where we simply pause it. All right. So when I first lift you off in that minute, your mind just went all over the place. Now there is this practice called mindfulness. So mindfulness is about the ability to get outside of that fast thinking brain. Because typically what happens if you've got into your fast brain is because you've got some thoughts that you're seeing the equivalent of a lion or a tiger out there, all right? That could be a missed deadline, that could be kids you have to pick up, etc. Whatever the stressors are today will kick in your fast brain. So that is quite simple. Even something as simple as right now, I would invite everybody on this call just to bring your attention right now to your feet. Just notice your feet right now on the ground. All the sensations that are coming from your feet. So that is one simple technique. Another technique could be as simple as just breathing. So I'll invite everybody right now to shift from observing your feet to actually feeling your breath, and I'm going to guide you. So you're going to breathe in for 4 seconds. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4. Breathe out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4. Breathe out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4. Breathe out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We could have kept doing this. Ideally, we do this for a minute or up to 5 minutes. And that, when you're bringing your attention out of that hamster wheel, out of that very busy mind, and onto another object of attention, your feet was one of them. Breathing and counting the breathing was yet another one. Now, obviously, another one is what most of you have heard about, is meditation or other mindfulness strategies. That could also include yoga and other techniques. These are all ways to train the mind to not get stuck in thoughts. Our mind is not the same thing as our thoughts. We're able to move out of our thoughts. We're able to actually observe our thoughts and bring our attention elsewhere. When we do that, then the threat dissipates. As our attention was on your feet, you weren't thinking about your next deadline. And as you're not thinking about your next deadline, the limbic, the fast brain, suddenly slows down. As it slows down, the neural conducts open up and go to the slower brain, that prefrontal cortex. So that is the study of mindfulness. So in mindfulness, and we won't get into the details of mindfulness, there's a lot of stuff written out there. There's over 10,000 studies to date that demonstrate.
Something. I can't even see.
Okay, so thank you for taking the volume.
Sorry about that, Carl.
That's okay. So through mindfulness research, we're realizing all the benefits. So we're realizing that when you learn to manage your mind, when you're able to actually get out of your mind and into your body or into another object of attention, then suddenly you're able to better deal with complexity. You're able to better, the second term, even this notion of resilience. You're better managing and maneuvering through the challenging times, which activate that fast break. So your brain being fully open, being fully operational, your body coming out of that fight, flight, freeze and coming out of that sympathetic nervous system to the parasympathetic nervous system, that's when the body rests and digests. So you're better open to collaborating with others. That's when the self-regulation around your emotions is easier to do. You become actually more innovative and creative because creativity, innovation are more advanced functions lodged in the prefrontal cortex and other surrounding structures. So if you're caught up in the stress, you don't have access to that as much. And you have better access to compassion towards yourself, not be as hard on yourself, because being hard on yourself just triggers yet again more stress and triggers yet again that fight, flight, freeze type of mechanism. So you want to be more, you want to bring kindness to yourself when you're in a stressful situation. And obviously you want to be able to bring kindness to others. So the benefits around training your mind are quite huge. And that is something that the invitation is there to actually seek out some of those various options to train your mind. All right. So what we would like to do at this point is to mainly bring awareness, because most of us are not aware when we're in our fast brain. And the objective was to demonstrate that when you are in a fast brain, there's all these negative consequences to it. There's a lot of positive ones to get you out of the trouble you're in, but it's not always done in the most optimal way. All right. So we're going to be breaking you out for you to have a conversation with with other team members, other participants, to look at two things. What impact is being on my fast brain having on me? The fact of being hijacked by my threat-based brain, and what impact is this having on your organization? All right, so we're going to break you out and just have a conversation. How is this impacting you? How is this impacting your organization?
Welcome back, everyone. Sorry about the quick swoop off to the breakout room. A little
very
bit
dramatic, very dramatic.
Very dramatic. Yes, exactly.
It was like a
Out you
Hollywood
go.
special effect. You know, suddenly you're looking at this black hole, like the Star Wars.
Yeah, like I'm being transported.
Exactly, you're being yanked.
Exactly. So one of our participants challenged Carl to summarize what has gone on so far in 1 minute. So I think he's going to attempt to do that, and then what we can do is debrief the two questions in the chat. That would be great. So Carl,
we have everybody right now. All right. Listen, thanks everybody. I think this is a really good example of what happens when the fast brain kicks in. So we had technical problems, and then the fast brain automatically kicks in. So what we've been basically saying so far as a wrap up is we have a fast brain and a slow brain. The fast brain is our older brain, reptilian, mammalian brain. So it kicks in when it perceives threats. Historically, these threats were life-threatening. Today's threats are stuff like I'm going to be late for a meeting. We have a decision to make. I don't have all the data. I have to pick up my kids at daycare, etc. So our brains are the same brains we had about 20,000 years ago, yet they are reacting to an environment which humankind has never seen before. We've never been as bombarded with information, with deadlines, with the pace of change that we have. So in this fast brain, we explain that this fast brain has a very specific way of reacting to save itself, to get away from threat. It's short term, it's abrupt, it judges, it blames, it seeks to protect itself in a very fast, unconscious way. So we're reacting to life rather than responding more wisely. All right. Now, the good news is that we are able to train our brain. We are able to notice our thoughts. And that practice is called mindfulness. So that practice allows you to bring your attention outside of the mind wandering and the hamster wheel is turning around, and brings your attention to something more concrete. Your feet, your breathing. There are many techniques out there which we won't get into. And when you're in that space, suddenly perspective happens. So the brain goes from the fast brain to the slow brain. Neural conducts actually open up. And in that fast brain, we're then able to have a longer term perspective. We're able to better manage our emotions. We're able to be more creative, innovative, etc. So all these virtues that make humans suddenly get unleashed. And we've broken up into groups. Some of you were able to have this conversation. How is being caught in your fast brain impacting you right now? Let's get a bit of the feedback through Pamela. What did come out? Quick, 1 or 2 words. What happens when my fast brain kicks in, and how's that impacting your life right now?
Mm-hmm. So fast brain impacts are fatigue and lack of focus. Being in the fast brain all the time as an organization is running the Red Queen's race through the looking glass. So now here you see it takes all the running you can do to keep in the same place. If you want to get somewhere else, you must run at least twice as fast as that. It's an interesting quote.
Totally.
So distracted and unable to focus are some other telltale signs of the fast brain. There's a question here, but I'll bring that to the next portion. Guilt, feeling performance is inadequate. Making decisions that aren't necessarily properly vetted. So just jumping into the best option available without thinking it through. Task orientation, compromise on efficiency and effectiveness, lack of empathy, ability to remove ourselves from work, not able to do anything well. That's a feeling I think most people have when they're, just running and running. Feeling inadequate as a result of not accomplishing goals. So again, just feeling you're not doing the best you can. Stifled creativity, only focusing on immediate solutions. And yes, Ahmed, you can get a recording.
So I'm just going to kick in here just because we're seeing the overwhelming impact that this is having. The impact it's having on you as an individual, the impact it's having on your organization. I'll be honest with you, my main objective today was to heighten awareness to this because we're blinded by it. We probably all knew we were more stressed and anxious. What we're not aware of, most of us are not aware on a daily basis how it's impacting your brain, how we're actually just being brought into that fast brain, and how we actually have a choice. And that's the good news. We actually have a choice to get into the eye of the tornado. We are able to train our minds to look at complexity and overwhelming situations, and then zoom in, take our attention away from all the hustle and bustle, reconnect, be it with our breath, other sensations. And as I'm saying, this is a technique and practices that do take a bit of time, but well worth investing. Because what I'm hearing across all of my clients and across the breakout rooms that I was in as well, is this is not going to change that much. Our fast brain will only get more and more solicited. Certainly, things like exercising, sleeping well, are foundational, and eating well are foundational things to get our brain better prepared to deal with all the complexity. But the next step, I think we've gone even beyond that. We now need to start finding more proactive ways to identify where the thoughts are going and why we get caught up in all of the negative repercussions and the negative patterns that come out of a hijack, a brain that's under perceived threat. All right. So any other comments that are worth highlighting before I move to the next slide, Pamela?
No, I think there was one from Jeff here that I thought was true. It says leadership plays a key role in stress and interpersonal skills, and we need to be clear on our work objectives. So I thought that was
and that'll lead to the next slide. There's two things. I think leadership plays a very big role because what we don't realize is leadership is often responsible for creating what we call a psychologically unsafe environment. All right. So if the environment is conducive to this fast pace, to this information overload, to these deadlines, to these emails coming in at 11 at night, expecting an answer on the next morning. So your behaviors, if you are contributing in any way, either as a leader or as a colleague, to increasing the perceived psychological unsafetyness. So if you're creating an environment where the fast brain gets hijacked, well, then you're contributing to lessening the ability of the people that are working around you. All right. So as leaders, we need to create this psychologically safe environment so we can access to that slower brain or full capacity.
Carl, how as a leader do you make yourself aware that you're doing that? Or how as an employee can you make your leader aware that they're doing that?
Well, it starts with individuals, indeed. So it's this notion of self-awareness. So self-awareness is indeed a cultivated skill. Now, I know I work in many large organizations where that's the main focus. The CEO, in this case, a very large pharmaceutical, his main leadership development angle is that of self-awareness. So realizing how the brain is working, realizing that I'm getting hijacked right now. It's this notion of emotional intelligence that you've probably all heard about. Self-awareness, self-management, awareness of others, management of others. Mm-hmm. The authors that wrote emotional intelligence are now writing on mindfulness. So Daniel Goleman, who wrote emotional intelligence, who coined the term, now writes with Focus, Alter Trait, these are his latest books, the mindfulness approach, the ability to manage your thoughts and your emotions is now the next stage to get that self-regulation, to be able to better create self-awareness. So managing upward is possibly bringing that attention, bringing that to your leader's attention, that indeed the pace of change right now is not sustainable. Maybe a good way of dealing with the leadership is just expressing your own limits and your own vulnerabilities and being authentic on how you're living these challenging times.
Fair point. Thank you, Carl.
All right. If there are no other questions, what we'd like to do is leave you with some tools. All right. The first one is training your mind. Now, that is a workshop on its own. Our main objective today was just to highlight and to some extent incite you to get curious about this notion of training your mind. All right. There are many practices out there. If you Google mindfulness, you'll find plenty of information. And that becomes, even on the short term, even practicing 5 minutes a day is already going to shape your mind, because training your mind around mindfulness actually rewires your brain. It actually reshapes the amygdala, which is the window, the intake of all of these external stimuli, and decides whether there is a stress or not. So by training your mind, you're able to reduce the sensitivity of your brain to external threats. You're also able to better regain control of where your thoughts are. Am I getting lost in all these narratives and all these stories, which have an 80% bias to them? Our brain naturally goes towards the negative, so that just increases the stress and anxiety, bringing us into the limbic system. So training your brain is one of the main things that we have to start doing as the world gets busier and busier. The second one is clarifying commitments. So as leaders, being very clear, having perspective, first for yourself, what are your values? It's very easy these days to get lost in the hustle and bustle. It's very easy to get lost in work from morning to night. It's very easy to focus just on our short-term to-dos that just bombard us because we get immediate reward from those, yet letting aside some of the more strategic or tactical even things we should be working on. So taking time when we're in a quiet space, when we've quieted ourselves and say, okay, what's really important for me in my life, in my work, in the other dimensions I choose to put emphasis on. As leaders, being very clear as well, not only focusing on urgency after urgency after urgency, carving out time to get perspective and committing to whatever has been identified. On the other side, 3, acknowledging and accepting what's getting in the way. The limbic system, the fast brain will kick in. Now, if we punish ourselves for being judgmental, for being reactive, for being tired, lacking energy, the more we're tough on ourselves, which we tend to be, the more we're actually activating that threat-based brain. So it sounds it's actually counterproductive to be hard on yourself. So to acknowledge that I'm going through challenging times, to acknowledge I'm tired, to acknowledge that I'm actually maybe not as patient as I used to be, etc. The more you just recognize it and give yourself kindness to have gotten to that point, that actually calms it down. That allows you to better go towards what's important for you. All right, so being hard on yourself is not the way out. That just actually adds oil to the fire. So what we have done is we're going to leave you with this tool, and we're going to invite you to fill out the various quadrants. So in the middle is the notion of mindfulness, learning to be present. Present with yourself, present with your environment. When you're present, you're not caught in your thoughts. All right, the idea is to learn to become the observer of your thoughts. It's called metacognition. We know through studies, the better you are at recognizing where your thoughts are, typically they'll have a negative bias to them, either going to the past or in the future, then the more apt you will be to get stressed, anxious, and basically become just more critical of yourself and others. So step number one is developing this notion of mindfulness, a practice, a formal practice, even daily, just when you're taking a walk, just bringing back to what's going on around you, or when you're having a meal, etc. Then it's being very clear, what is important for me? What do I want to, how do I want to live my life to have a fulfilling life? If we don't ask the question, our limbic system, the fast brain, will just pull us all into our old things, all into the habits, into some numbing strategies, etc. So we have to take some time, ask ourselves the question, what's important to me? What dimensions in my life do I want to privilege? Then two, commit to them. What behaviors do I actually want to do? My suggestions, do less than more. Take 1, 2 behaviors, but live them fully. The ones that are bringing you closer to the life that you'd like to have, not the one that society is dragging you into, and the one that your fast brain is bringing you into. So on the one hand, move towards a slower brain. That is on the right-hand side. Move towards the green zone where your brain is in touch, where you're connected to it, where you're going where you think you should be going in life, not where life is just dragging you into. On the other hand, you need to ask yourself the question, what kind of beliefs are keeping me stuck where I am? So if I'm working excessive hours, what kind of needs, hidden assumptions are getting in the way? Very often we'll say, well, if I don't work like this, I'm going to lose my job, or people won't like me, or I won't be the accomplished professional I want to be. So we get this activates the whole threat system. And that leads to impulsive routines, either working late or numbing yourself or doing behaviors which are not conducive to the person you want to be. So the name of the game is threefold, is you have to find ways of settling down your mind. Secondly, you have to be very clear on intent. Where am I going? And committing to those few critical actions that bring you in that direction. What is often missing in the equation is the left-hand side, is recognizing those things getting us stuck in our pathways of being. All right. The mind will just repeat what it's always done from childhood. So if I'm used to just running away from problems under stress, you will run away from problems. If you're used to fighting your way out of situations, well, then you're going to fight your way out with judging and blaming and getting aggressive. So be aware of what's holding you back. Tame it. Just acknowledge it. Be kind to it. It was there for a reason. It kept you going all these years. But at one point, we could say, I'm willing to let it go. Or at least acknowledge it's there, but not give it the importance it should have. And that comes from a slowed down brain. So you will be getting a sheet, if not already the case, just to fill out those questions. And that's what we want to leave you with. So we hope this brought up some interesting insights, or at least some awareness, self-awareness, which is what we were aiming today, is greater self-awareness, and some tools to guide you forward. So if there are any questions or comments, I could hand this over to Pamela at this point.
Yeah, there are some questions, and I just wanted to call out how amazing all those contributing on the chat are. There's a lot of great suggestions, a lot of good books, some links. So check out the chat if you haven't already. And so some of the questions that have come out throughout this session, I've been keeping. So somebody asked, what should the percentage breakdown between slow and fast brain be?
tempted to say the more the better on the slow brain, obviously. Right now, typically, we may be running, well, we know the automatic brain is probably about 95% of the time, which is a lot geared to the limbic system, that faster brain. So we tend to run on automatic pilot. Even the daily decisions we make have been programmed from past decisions. So the more the merrier. There's actually a great book written by Dan Harris called 10% Happier. So he's an advocate of the mindfulness approach and slowing down your brain. So you may want to check that out. It's a really fun read. It's an easy read. He's an American broadcaster. And he's basically saying, even if you just get 10% more awareness of your thought, even if 10% of the time you're able to just reconnect with yourself and get out of that habitual pattern of getting lost in the past or projecting the future, you're already going to be living a much happier and balanced life. So there's no percentage, just get 1 percentage point at a time and it's going in the right direction.
Great, thank you for that. So another question here, or comment, is that they say, I find many advantages of working in my fast brain. Is there such thing as good stress? And some people perform well with that.
Totally.
As long as the negative impacts you mentioned are not excessive, is there anything wrong with that?
No, that's a very good point. Now, there's a curve on stress, all right? The optimal is we do need stress in life. So thank you so much for bringing that up. We do need stress to move forward, all right? This place of flow that you may have heard about, that's when it's optimal stress. The time it gets problematic is when you're feeling it yourself, when you're feeling that you're being caught in short-term thinking, when you feel you're not as patient, when you feel you're having trouble gaining perspective on problems, when you're feeling somewhat overwhelmed by life. Often we'll find it by this contraction. And in time, the brain is able to go to this limbic system, to this fast brain for a certain period, but it's not made to hang out there for long. It wasn't built for that. The brain was built to have regular periods where it slowed down, as our grandparents or in the tundra when you were way back when. So this notion of being on all the time eventually brings excess stress, anxiety, eventually burnout. So it's up to you to know if you're finding the right balance. Through exercise, that could be a way of managing that stress as well. All right. So there are other techniques. Certainly the exercising, sleeping well, eating well, just having a good balance, you could function under stress for a longer period. But at one point, the body starts crying out. And the idea is to be very alert to that.
Self-awareness again.
Self-awareness.
Right. Okay, so last question for today. What do I do when external factors are more overwhelming than my work and work has ended up becoming an escape? Which I think many of us do that, inadvertently and at times. Yeah.
My automatic reaction to that one would be to simply find a place of safety. Get back into your own zone. Now, it could be going out to the nature. It could be some mindfulness practice. Whatever works for you, use the 4 quadrants we just talked about. What I'm hearing from that is your life has gotten out of balance. And you first need to settle down the mind. All right, in some shape or form, exercising, getting out into nature, mindfulness practice, whatever, a good hot bath, whatever it takes for you just to get back into that safe space, and then go through the 4 quadrants. What is really important for me? Because what I'm hearing here is on the left-hand side, the question number 3, I believe, in your grid is you're going through an escape. I think that if I just go into work, I won't have to think about my other problem. That is a moving away strategy. That is holding you back from your full potential. That's simply going back to an old reflex. And this is what self-awareness is recognizing when you're falling back into old patterns that may have served you, but right now what I'm hearing, it's not serving you anymore. So you need to be clear on what's important for you. And the only way you'll be able to make that switch is if you've got a calmer brain. If you're active, overly threatened, then you're going to go back to your old reflex.
Great. Thanks, Carl. So that's all the time we have for questions today. I wanted to thank everyone who joined in to make this session a success. Again, the chat was great. We will definitely send that along with the email. I want to thank Carl. This was not only an informative session, but it was with a lot of takeaways, but it was also a really great chance to step back and reflect on ourselves. So within the next 24 hours, you will be receiving an email from us with a recording of the session and the takeaway tool that Carl discussed, as well as some book recommendations. So thank you again for attending this session and our Level Up webinar series. We'd love to stay connected. So if you have any questions at all, feel free to send us an email or add us to your LinkedIn network. Our next session will be on Wednesday, October 28th with Jerry Remiard, who will be speaking about leadership and the growth mindset. So have a wonderful week, everyone. Stay safe. And again, apologies for the technical issues. Have a great day.